As they say in Kentucky, once a year, we are down the stretch.
Wait a minute, you're just going to interrupt the darkness like that?
I had
behind the steering wheel.
I had a really good intro, like in my head for this, for
You
Mr.
still
Mike
do.
Schaefer.
Touching you.
Can we just go to break and then reignite this here?
Do over?
I'm sorry, he played the darkness coming back, all right?
All right, so much for the great intro. We're down the stretch. Here's our friend Mike Schaefer. Hey, Mike, how you doing, man?
There's Maya.
I'm doing well. What do we got going on this morning?
It's myself.
I believe.
Sorry, let me do a proper intro here. You're listening to Gary and Matt here on 1620 The Zone. I'm Matt McMaster, Gary Sharp on the road with the red hot Omaha Mavericks, who are going to Tulsa, Oklahoma to take on the ORU Golden Eagles. So I am joined by Mr. Kaleb Henry, and now we are joined by our friend, Husker 24/7 writer Mike Schaefer.
Mike. Wow, I haven't done radio with Kaleb Henry in some time. This is an exciting opportunity in front of me here.
Been a hot minute, Schaefer. Been a hot minute.
You know, I told Kaleb, I go, is this a radio show or is this just a Friday night out at the Haymarket talking football? I mean, this is
only after we all happen to meet up randomly after going to Nickelback in October.
That's what it was.
Okay, people.
That was a phenomenal meetup.
People are like, wait, what? That happened. We all just decided to go to Nickelback. No one communicated to each other that we were going to Nickelback.
So you left that out.
Kaleb was going.
You knew Kaleb was going? Wow,
yeah.
I was left out.
We had talked earlier that day on a radio show. Even.
Funny enough.
I was hammering ciders ready to listen to Animals.
Kaleb Henry out of context. That's incredible. Mike, I want to talk about one situation that's currently going on just in the grand scheme of college football. Xavier Lucas is a player out in Wisconsin. He
anymore.
Wanted to enter the transfer portal and go to Miami, but the transfer portal window was essentially closed, and Wisconsin was like, "Well, it's closed. You can't go." And Xavier Lucas said, "Nope, I'm going to go anyway." And so now he's just going to Miami, and now there's going to be this whole, I'm assuming, litigation will go into the fact of whether or not he's allowed to do that, allowed to just unenroll outside of the transfer portal window and then re-enroll essentially in Miami. Can you give us any details of the situation that I miss out on? Maybe you can fill me in on that. And what would this do to college football if this were able, if they allowed him to do this?
I guess part of it was, didn't this issue come well before the transfer portal window closed? Like he wanted to leave and Wisconsin blocked him from leaving because he had signed he had signed something.
Like a financial offer.
Yes.
Right. And so I don't even know that it predates the idea of the portal window closing.
Mm-hmm.
We're just in this awful period of time where everything is going to be challenged in the courts. The courts are throwing everything open and there are no rules. So I don't have a whole lot more information.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of those that is a super unique situation, but it's also, if precedent gets set that, Xavier Lucas can leave in a non-portal window time, or that Wisconsin can block somebody from going, like it's either way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a precedent gets set that is sort of far-reaching in terms of consequence. So I don't know, like, how this one is going to play out. It's also one of those where, like, and I'm probably just not thinking hard enough on this. Like, it's one of those where it always fascinates me how people that end up in these situations aren't really, like, is Xavier Lucas going to be a big difference maker for Miami?
Sure. That's a great point.
So, but the idea is more the precedent. So that's what matters.
Exactly.
And with apologies to Xavier Lucas and his family, he's sort of the secondary aspect of this versus whatever the precedent ends up being. And then, how this all gets, how it all plays out going forward. Because if he can challenge and wins in court that he can transfer whenever he wants, despite whatever the rules that everyone had agreed upon were, then the idea becomes, well, okay, it doesn't matter if the committee puts together or agrees to have this portal window of 10 days in January next year, because you can just go to the court system and throw it wide open anyway.
So essentially, yeah. Well,
I mean, I guess the problem I have is that we're just in this period of time where it's like you can't even establish framework of rules
Yes.
because everything is going to get challenged. So how do you have any kind of, I guess, like any kind of regulation at all? And so it's just, I never envisioned this being as big of a mess as it is. And maybe there were people out there who saw all of this coming. I think there was definitely people who saw the multiple transfers and all of that. I don't know that we saw that the court system was just going to be like, you know what? Nothing matters. Rules don't matter. Regulations don't matter, which is wild because it's the court system. But there's a lot in here that has to be solved, and it's going to take people a lot smarter than me and the willingness to compromise, which does not seem like that's going to be a thing from either the player side, who have no collective representation, which is a big part of this, or the coaches side, who do have a collective representation, but are more than willing to go against what they vote on if it benefits them, as we've seen in the past. So it's a really, college sports is in a super weird spot, which is unfortunate because instead of talking about, things like the great college football playoff that played out in front of us, we have to spend our time talking about a defensive back who may be playing for Miami or Wisconsin next year. We don't really know, but could set, a massive precedent for how the transfer portal operates going forward.
So essentially, he entered in a 2-year binding agreement with under NIL constraints with Wisconsin. So Wisconsin was like, you're under this contract. You can't go anywhere. Lucas says, screw that. I'm going to go anyway. And then now it's essentially
said contracts aren't a real thing now.
Yeah. So essentially it's now, if Wisconsin decides to go to the courts and sue him, and it's going to set a massive precedent of whether or not these contracts are binding or whether or not you can really just go whenever the hell you want. Either way, it would put another wrinkle into everything and probably put us a step closer regardless of going to a collective bargaining agreement, which who in the bleep knows when that's going to happen, or even that is going to be tabled at a discussion. But you're absolutely right. I mean, just taken away from the product left, right, and center with all the things that are happening around the football as opposed to the actual football.
Well,
it's honestly, like I had said this before, I always thought baseball was the king of terrible optics in an off season and just made people hate the sport that they actually like.
Yeah.
And here comes college athletics just charging through the door like Kool-Aid man. But don't forget about us. We're going to be the most obnoxious, annoying thing in the world. And it sucks. The product has issues, right? Like, especially with the portal, you're going to have teams that just don't have consistency in terms of players that and all of that. But the sport is still good. The games can still be good. The games can still be memorable. But the games are played once a week for a 3-month, 4-month session. The rest of it is just us having endless discussions about stuff that, frankly, I don't know where you guys are at with it. I try to tune a lot of this out. And it's my job, that's the bad part. I'm supposed to be someone who's really locked in on this.
Yeah.
And I mean, I am to a degree, but it's really hard to care when a set of rules gets created and then 48 hours later, we're having a court challenge and it's something else entirely. Like, the average fan should not spend a lot of time thinking about this because, frankly, it's going to change 7 more times before any of it matters.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you Schaefer, you had speaking of rules changing, we're going to get to revenue sharing, later on this year, and schools had started to announce the way that they were going to break up the revenue sharing. Department of Education comes out and says, well, you have to do it this way by Title IX. So the rules are constantly changing. We don't know what anyone's actually playing under. Right now, it seems like the only rule that is a constant is you can't leave a team mid-season and go play for another team. Like that,
which is good. I like that rule. Let's try to keep that one.
Let's not scrap everything. Like right now, you still have to be academically eligible and enrolled at the beginning of the semester. Like, we still have that. As for the football on the field, Schaefer, first year of the 12-team playoff, you've got the first year of an even bigger SEC, an even bigger Big Ten. The Pac-12 is down to 2 and playing in the Mountain West. What was your take on just the season that was? And, of course, now we're wrapped up. You've got Ohio State, who lost to Michigan, didn't play for a Big Ten title, but is national champions.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw out of this was the 12-team playoff was a massive success in terms of, You gave teams more opportunities. More teams got opportunities that wouldn't have played in the playoff. You could make the case, and I feel this way, that the most talented team in the country won the title, even though they had lost 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who likes the NFL and likes the NFL playoffs, would be totally fine if the Commanders beat the Eagles and are, not the NFC East champions, but still won the NFC, because that's how a playoff works. I'm good with that. And so I'm totally fine with what we saw this year. I thought it was great that we got right off the bat, a group of 5 team had the opportunity to get into the second round of the playoffs because they had won games on the field. Everyone had to earn, stuff that in front of them. It's wild that all of the teams that had a bye lost immediately. There's definitely changes I would like to see happen. I would definitely like to see teams that earn a bye should have the opportunity to play one more home game. That's probably the biggest change that I would enact. I don't even know that I want to go to 16 teams. I think I'm fine with 12.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to see the first and second round games played on home.
Yes.
Because I think those teams that earn byes should have gotten an opportunity. We should have seen Penn State have to go to Boise and play on the blue field. We should have seen, Texas playing under the lights in Tempe. We should have seen Oregon hosting Ohio State, what would have been the most insane environment in a college football game in all of 2024, 25.
Absolutely.
And I think we kind of got robbed of those things. And I hope that is now, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen for this next year, but I hope that's a real conversation. Because I think the other killer here is, if you were an Ohio State fan, you probably couldn't get to all 3 of those games. It's tough to ask. They had the home game, of course, but then you go to the Rose Bowl, and then you've got, actually 4 games. You go to the Rose Bowl, you got, after that, you have the game against Texas, and then you have the game in the national championship in Atlanta. So I really think they have to look at home games for the second round, just because it seems like that would be a better idea overall for fans. Asking them to spend that much money going to these places that have no connection to anything, it's those are kind of the small changes. Overall, I thought the college football playoff was a success. I thought it was a great year. It was a fun year. We never knew who was going to be the front runner for a title at any point in time. And this is maybe the most important thing, we got to dunk on the SEC, and everybody loves that.
That's all we really want to do.
Mike, is the bar now and kind of forever for Nebraska football to make the college football playoff? Is that just the precedent? Every year as you walk in, you're like, all right, this should be a team with all the money and resources and whatnot to make the 12-team field?
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the goal, right? But I think for a team that's still in the infancy of winning, which, they managed to get to the Pinstripe Bowl, I would think the next big step is to prove that you're more than just a middle-of-the-road to lower-end Big Ten team.
Yeah.
I don't care about Nebraska making the college football playoff until it happens. It's not to me, I need to see Nebraska prove that they can finish games against Illinois, that they can handle UCLA coming to town who didn't even make a bowl game and win that game, before I start having the thoughts in my mind about Nebraska as a college football playoff team. I think around here, you want so badly for it to be back to what it was that this idea that Nebraska can just skip steps to get there, just because we've seen Indiana jump into the college football playoff. And I understand, I'm not trying to say that they need another 8 years to be able to show that they can be a ranked team. I'm just saying, for me personally, I kind of need to see Nebraska show consistency before I even worry about the idea that they could be like the 10 seed in a college football playoff. Now, should that be the standard? I think that's more the question of what you're asking.
Yeah.
Sure. That's totally fine. How do you measure that standard when you don't even seem close to it right now? That's sort of where I'm at in my mind. So it's kind of the idea that Matt Rule is building towards that. Do we think realistically he should be there in 25, or is it more likely 26, Dylan's third year, if you would, that Nebraska might be in their best position for?
Yeah.
So, it's a really interesting, fascinating conversation.
Well, and your next step for the Huskers is getting into this off season. Your colleague Michael Bruntz has got a story up on that roster update from yesterday. 132 players listed on the roster. You got to get to 105 before this fall. Any surprises on that roster update, and how do you see that configuration going over the next couple months before we get to, at least for now, another transfer portal window?
I think there was a handful, and I don't have the names right off the top of my head, but there's a handful of walk-on types that I think have already just sort of chosen to just be students at the University of Nebraska. I think Alex Bullock is one of them.
Yep, Bullock and Barrett Leventritt. Those would be the two biggest ones.
I don't think they went into the portal. I think they're staying at Nebraska and just finishing their careers as students. And I could be wrong on that, but I don't recall either going into the portal. So for me, more than anything, that was kind of the notable stuff. And then I think Nebraska will find their way down to they have to, but I think they'll find their way down to 105 with, a few more of the walk-on players are going to have to look for opportunities in the spring when that window opens, or, guys are just going to have to decide whether they're done playing football and they want to stay at Nebraska. And then on top of it, you've got a defensive back room that it's going to change over.
29.
Addison Williams isn't going to keep everyone. John Butler isn't going to keep everyone. Mm-hmm. That is a position room where if nothing else happens at the end of 2025, if you're Nebraska, you'd really like Addison Williams to come back so you're not on your fifth defensive back coach in 5 seasons. Yeah. Because and it's not just that it's a different person at the head of the room. These guys all have very different ideas as to the type of players they want.
Yeah.
And Evan Cooper, who is involved in Nebraska's recruiting to a higher level than I suspect Addison Williams will be or John Butler was, really had kind of a soft spot in the type of player that he liked. And I think they got a bunch of guys that are interesting but aren't necessarily ready to contribute. And when you are limited to a 105-man roster right now, I don't know that Nebraska can keep some of those guys around. So then what ends up happening is you have Addison Williams on the road offering a ton of defensive backs because they have to change that room over for what feels like the third time in 4 years. And that presents a really interesting challenge because, what is a Ramir Stewart to Addison Williams? Right. And that's a guy that we've seen him make an interception. We've seen him play. But is he going to have an opportunity to really kind of push for real playing time? Is he, a further backup down the line? We've already seen DiCaprio Boodle leave. So there's some guys where it's like they're going to have to make decisions, and Nebraska is going to have to make decisions because they just can't keep all of these people. And some of them are a lot further away from contributing than where you'd probably want them to be right now.
Mike, I want to. They lose out on Shiza Pete, the New Mexico state tackle to Kentucky, who apparently dropped an absolute bag in order to get him to get on the team. And maybe that was out of spite a little bit against Nebraska due to the fact that Nebraska has gutted that wide receiver room of Kentucky. But you got Gunnar Gatula at the one tackle spot. Give me your outlook on the other tackle spot right now. Who would you say, and maybe if you don't want to go out on the limb, that's fine, and just give a preview. But I'll ask you, who do you think is the leader in the clubhouse right now to be starting at that other tackle spot come Arrowhead Day against Cincinnati?
Are we okay? So of the two tackle spots, and you're saying Gunnar Gatula is one.
Yes.
So wouldn't Pritchett be the other one?
Is that what you think?
Well, I don't think that he came here to be a backup.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but there's going to be competition here, right? I mean, you're still going to have. I mean, we're assuming Teddy's coming back. You're assuming Turner's coming back.
Well, there's a super fascinating discussion to be had about the tackle position because you have Prohaska, who has played an entirety of one full season and parts of 3 others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have Turner Corcoran, who never should have been a tackle, but keeps finding his way further out instead of being an interior offensive lineman.
He's about to be a tight end.
Huh. Yeah, where is his role in all of this? Because he redshirted to come back. I think he is one of the more fascinating conversations, and I look forward to the next time Matt Rule has a media availability to kind of update where Turner Corcoran is and where Teddy Prohaska is and what Nebraska sees in this situation. Because again, if you're down to a 105-man roster, and you don't know if Teddy Prohaska or Turner Corcoran are going to be able to contribute for you in 2025, or you've got real questions about their health or if long-term viability. It's just it's a really unique spot where they find themselves. And then you have Grant Bricks, who's played at guard at times. You have Brock Knutson. Where's he at on the development track? You have Grant Segrin, who they really liked, and I think Kaleb can speak to this. He was popping up on the depth chart on the left tackle spot. You have Tyler Nash.
Yeah.
I mean, they have bodies, but I think a lot of it is they just don't know because you have a weird set of circumstances. The 3 guys that have played left tackle that are on your roster are all hurt or rehabbing this spring. So I don't know that you're going to get any of Gunnar Gatula, Turner Corcoran, or Teddy Prohaska available a lot this spring. Do you move Elijah Pritchett, who struggled at right tackle at Alabama but played left tackle for a game? Do you move him to left tackle?
Sure.
Is Nebraska currently wading through what's left in the transfer portal to see if there's a warm body that can give them something? Or do you just have to go with what you've recruited over the last few years? To me, the biggest thing going on with Nebraska is that they need to make sure their offensive line recruiting and development makes it so they don't have to go into the portal every year. Because I think it's going to be really challenging for Nebraska to build a team if they have to spend as much money as you do on offensive linemen in the transfer portal. Because that is, I mean, you were talking about Kentucky dropped a bag. Well, Nebraska was never the favorite for Pete until they basically put their own mega offer together that moved them past Vanderbilt. Like, that's how this works. And so, it's a challenging spot, but you really need these tackles you bring in to develop and be good. And that puts a lot of, stress and pressure on Donovan Raiola and on Nebraska's operation as a whole. You really can't afford to miss on a bunch of linemen. You need that group of young guys, the Sam Sledges and the Brock Knutsons and all of those. You need some hits out of that class from a couple years ago. And now's the time. They're going into their 3rd year.
Yeah.
This is when the expectation is that they should be ready to help. And we're going to find out a lot about that this spring.
Going to find a lot about Donovan Raiola and how good of a recruiter and developer he is for sure. So, Mike, great stuff as always, man. Thank you for coming on. We'll see you next Friday, all right?
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Enjoy what's left of your show and your week.
Thank you.
We'll see you.